Oh, hello there, yes. Cooler. It's going to rain. It's going to be quite nice. Going to like it. Less pollen. Yes, anyway, today I thought we'd do a little bit of a dive into the Daily Telegraph. So, hey-ho, let's go. Well, yes, first up we have a Telegraph comment, which is the Tories need to regain the initiative. What does the Conservative Party stand for? Who does it represent? And what is it doing to back them? Which is, some legitimate questions, and it gives us a nice bit of background to this. The answer, as one of the United States Founding Fathers James Madison wrote, is to accept we have no angels available to govern us, only ambitious, self-interested men and women. It's worthwhile bearing in mind that particular one for what's coming later. We need to limit the size of the state to keep their power in check, and we need democratic accountability to keep our officials answerable to the people they serve. Indeed, yes, more foreshadowing, methinks, yes. And finally it finishes with Brexit was Britain's 21st century attempt to take back responsibility from the so-called experts. It sought to return us to the messy reality of democratic government by flawed, self-interested, that word again, politicians and public servants. In an imperfect world, that is still the best solution anyone has found. Indeed, those flawed, self-interested people, that we must get back to democracy, mustn't we? Yes, there's some viable words there. So let's have a look at some of the other Telegraph comment stuff. First of all, there's Jacob Rees-Mogg, a man who speaks very slowly because that's how fast he thinks. Yes. Anyway, he got hacked off yesterday because, having called effectively the Democratic committee that was looking into Boris Johnson a kangaroo court or a witch hunt or words similar, he was criticised for it, and apparently he shouldn't have been because, democratic accountability, inbuilt Tory majority on the report, chair that people voted for, that whole democratic accountability, the democracy bit, apparently was wrong. But apparently, according to him, Parliament will look ridiculous if MPs are punished for criticising their peers. Indeed. For example, what about all those MPs who called Boris Johnson a liar and got thrown out of the House of Commons? I'm not really quite sure what happens to them anymore. Democratic accountability looking ridiculous and other things. Anyway, yes, which brings us neatly perhaps on to ordinary MPs and the curious case of David Warburton, who's a Somerset MP who hasn't actually managed to sit in the Commons for the best part of 2 years on account of him having taken a lot of drink and a lot of drugs and, this is the alleged part, allegedly, harassed a number of women. Anyway, he's decided to stand down because apparently the whole democratic accountability thing only kicks into play when basically he's forced to. So this will be number, 4 by-elections, democratic accountability by-elections, democratic accountability, one that we'll have. And it'll be yet another seat that the Conservatives will lose. There's a really good chance that they'll lose 3 out of their 4 democratic accountability by-election seats. And the Daily Telegraph will pretend that the government needs to get back to policies that we can all get behind. And having left our democratic accountability, let's have a look at the policies that the Telegraph is suggesting. And it manages to sort of suggest that amongst the many policies that the government should be following is this particular one. The government needs to start devising a list of policies that will answer these questions urgently. Indeed, the abolition of inheritance tax would be one such policy. Oh, really? Not only is it widely hated amongst aspirational voters who the Tories have traditionally attracted. Yes, aspirational voters. I wonder what's another word for aspirational voters. Could we call them people who have a sort of interest in maintaining their assets? What would we call that? That'd be the rich, wouldn't it? Yes, the rich and our aspirational voters, because we can't actually talk about the rich properly, can we? They become other things. They're now Aspirational voters, yes. Isn't everyone an aspirational voter who votes? I don't know, but apparently not. Anyway, let's move on. Not only is it widely hated amongst aspirational voters the Tories have traditionally attracted, promising to scrap it will create a clear dividing line with the Labour Party. Yes, indeed, the Labour Party, whose policies are identical to the Tories. Let's face it, the Labour Party will promise to abolish inheritance tax next week, because that's democracy, folks, is a real choice. While Keir Starmer and his acolytes, anyone on the left has acolytes, even Sir Keir, who isn't on the left, and his acolytes trade on class envy. Yes, indeed, Sir Keir Starmer is very envious of some people, Sir Keir. Anyway, and the accumulated wealth of the British population as another potential cash cow for funding public services. Yes, funding public services. It'd be awful if you have a government that funded public services, wouldn't it? You know, imagine taxing the rich to do that. That would, aspirational voters to do that. It'd be appalling, wouldn't it? The Conservatives should stand for self-reliance. Yes, indeed. Families and prudence. And yes, like MPs like David, self-reliance, families and prudence. Boris Johnson, self-reliance, families and prudence. Boris Johnson, after all, has a number of families, doesn't he? Yes. And prudence, which we can easily apply to all of these men that we've looked at this morning. There is a strong moral case for its abolition as well as a political one. Indeed. So there we have it, folks. So many things that the Conservatives can do. They can cut tax for aspirational voters, because magically, despite everything else that's going on, that's the burning issue. I mean, that'll really tackle all of those huge problems there are, because it will mean that there's less money going into the Treasury, and we can use that less money to things. Yeah. I don't know. It astounds me when I actually read this stuff that anyone can believe any of this guff anymore. Is this how the German population felt in early 1945 when they sort of went to the cinema and watched newsreel or opened up, Der Stürmer or whatever the particular newspaper was that they were reading? Because that's vaguely where I feel we are now. It's just such utter meaningless rubbish, other than magically trying to keep the wheels on late capitalism when they're patently falling off. Anyway, have a lovely day.